This happened back in the spring of 2018. I was 26 at the time and had just gone through a messy breakup, which resulted in me having to downsize rapidly from a two-bedroom house to a small studio apartment in the city. Because the new place was tiny, I had a lot of overflow belongings, winter clothes, old tax documents, some sentimental furniture that I couldn't fit but didn't want to throw away. I looked around for storage options, and everything near my apartment was incredibly expensive. I eventually found a place called You Store It, located in an industrial park about 20 minutes outside the city limits. It was significantly cheaper than the others, mostly because it was older and located in a bit of a desolate area, surrounded by warehouses and trucking depots that all closed down by 6 p.m. The facility itself was massive, just row after row of corrugated metal buildings surrounded by a high chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. It was mostly automated. You punched in a gate code to drive in, and you used your own padlock on your unit door. There was rarely an actual employee on site, especially during the evening hours when I usually went. My unit was in Building K, Row 4, Unit number K-42. It was deep inside the complex. To get there, you had to drive past endless rows of identical beige metal doors. It always felt eerie driving through there at night under the buzzing sodium vapor lights. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of my own tires on the gravel. The first few weeks were uneventful. I made several trips moving boxes in during the evenings after work. I rarely saw anyone else. Occasionally, I'd see a padlock hanging open on another unit or a discarded coffee cup, but that was it. The first time I noticed something off about my neighbor was on a Tuesday night around 9 p.m. I was in my unit, K-42, reorganizing some plastic totes to make room for a bicycle. The unit right next to mine, K-43, had always been locked with a heavy-duty circular disc lock that looked brand new. As I was shifting boxes, I bumped against the dividing aluminum wall. It made a loud, echoing rattle. Almost immediately, I heard a sound come from inside K-43. It was faint but distinct. It sounded like heavy fabric sliding across concrete, like someone dragging a duffel bag or a blanket. I paused and listened. I knew rats were common in these places, but this sounded too heavy for a rat. I waited for about a minute, but there was silence. I figured maybe something had just fallen over due to the vibration of me hitting the wall. A week later, I went back to retrieve some camping gear for an upcoming trip. It was later this time, probably close to 11 p.m. The facility was completely deserted. As I pulled up to row K, I noticed a car parked 2 spots down from my unit. It was an older tan sedan, very nondescript. I parked and got out. As I approached my unit, I realized the rolling door to K-43 was cracked open about 6 inches from the ground. There were no lights inside. I tried to ignore it. It wasn't my business. I unlocked my door and rolled it up, the metal screeching loudly in the quiet night. As I stepped into my unit, I heard a voice come from K-43. It was a man's voice, very low and monotone. He wasn't shouting, he was murmuring. It sounded like he was reading a list or reciting something. 4 across, 2 down, reset. 4 across, 2 down. I froze. I didn't want to make any noise to let him know I was there. The murmuring continued for about 30 seconds and then stopped abruptly. I heard the distinct sound of metal clinking against concrete and then heavy breathing. Not panicked breathing, just slow, deep breaths, like someone who had just finished moving something heavy. I quietly grabbed my tent bag, stepped out, and gently pulled my door down just enough so I could lock it without slamming it. As I walked back to my car, I glanced at the tan sedan. It was empty. I drove out of there faster than usual, feeling a strange knot in my stomach. I didn't go back for nearly 3 weeks. I kept putting it off, but eventually I needed my winter coat out of storage as the weather was turning. I decided to go on a Saturday afternoon, figuring it would be busier and feel safer. When I arrived around 2 p.m., there were a few other people at the facility, mostly near the front gate, but back in row K, I was alone again. I pulled up to my unit. The door to K-43 was closed and locked with the same disc lock. Everything looked normal. I opened my unit and started digging through boxes in the back to find my coat. While I was back there, a smell hit me. It was faint, wafting over the top of the dividing wall where there was a small gap for airflow. It wasn't a rotten smell like garbage or a dead animal. It was sharp and chemical. It smelled intensely of bleach and ammonia, mixed with something else underneath it, something sweet and coppery. It was the smell of an industrial cleaning attempt trying to cover up something. I found my coat and was about to leave when I noticed something on the concrete floor near the dividing wall between our units. It was a small, dried reddish-brown stain. It looked like rust water, but it hadn't rained in weeks and my unit was dry. I left quickly. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the murmuring man and the chemical smell. I debated calling the management office, but I didn't know what to say. My neighbor smells like bleach? It didn't seem like enough. The final incident happened 4 days later. I realized I had left my flashlight in my storage unit the last visit, and I needed it for work the next morning. I had to go back that night. It was raining hard when I got there at 10:30 p.m. The sound of the rain hitting the metal roofs was deafening. I drove to row K. The tan sedan was there again, parked directly in front of K-43. The door to K-43 was fully open. I stopped my car about 20 feet back, headlights shining toward the units. The interior of K-43 was illuminated by a small battery-powered camping lantern sitting on the floor. The unit was almost entirely empty. There were no boxes, no furniture. The only things inside was a large blue plastic tarp spread across the center of the concrete floor, and a man sitting on a folding chair in the corner, facing the back wall. He was wearing a yellow raincoat. He wasn't moving. He was just staring at the blank aluminum back wall of the unit. My headlights must have hit him, so he slowly turned his head to look toward my car. I couldn't make out his features well through the rain in the distance, but his expression was completely blank. He didn't look angry or scared. He just looked hollow. He stood up slowly. I didn't wait to see what he was going to do. I threw my car into reverse, backed rapidly down the aisle, and sped toward the exit gate. I punched in my code with shaking hands and didn't look back until I was on the main highway. I called the storage facility management the next morning and told them I thought someone was living in K-43 and acting strangely. They said they would send someone to check it out. 2 days later, I received an email from the facility saying that the tenant of K-43 had been evicted due to a lease violation. They didn't give any details. I went back the following weekend to move all of my belongings out. I couldn't handle being there anymore. When I arrived, the door to K-43 was rolled up and it was being cleaned out by 2 guys in coveralls. The unit was completely bare. The concrete floor looked cleaner than any other unit I had seen, scrubbed almost white in the center. As I was loading the last of my boxes into my truck, the cleaners walked out of K-43, shaking his head. He was holding a large black garbage bag that clinked with the sound of glass. I heard him say to his partner, "I don't know what this guy was doing in here, but I've never seen so many empty bottles of drain cleaner in my life." I finished loading my truck and turned in my gate key. I never found out who the man in the yellow raincoat was or what he was doing in that empty metal room late at night, murmuring numbers to himself. But every time I drive past an industrial park now, I think about that sharp smell of bleach and the man sitting alone on a chair, staring at a blank wall.